Cool. So we are the Study Spaces team, and our project focused on the study space experience for the UT student. So I'm Neil Potness. I'm an Arts and Entertainment Technologies major.
Ivy, and I'm a marketing major.
Hey guys, I'm Corey and I'm an MIS major.
Hey, I'm Faison. I'm a computer science major.
And Sanji couldn't make it because she's in a different time zone, but she is here in spirit. So we are the prototype team. Our key objective was responsible for building off of last semester's work and having a tested prototype based on what was ideated. So this is where we focused our efforts last semester. And this is what we intended on looking like this semester, when in reality, it ended up looking like this right here. So again, to your right is how we run through the design thinking process. And this, again, goes to show that the entire process is nonlinear, intending for it to be one section and then having to go back and make it more of an iterative process. So again, last semester, we focused on the first three parts with a little bit of ideation. So what happened last semester? So we identified the issue. Students have various complaints when it comes to study space at UT. We immersed ourselves in the issue. We began sending out surveys of students, interviewing them, analyzing responses. We conducted about 20 user interviews and got about 100 survey responses. And then we met with Associate Dean of Students, Doug Gerard, and identified the Student Services Building, or the SSB, as an opportunity to create a study space. And the reason I put reframe here also is because we pivoted or reframed without realizing that we did. And that is the SSB is redesigning a space really going to address the data that we collected and all those survey responses and those user interviews. So that's where we came in, reframing the issue again, and that is redesigning the SSB going to accommodate to the various needs of a study space user as identified in surveys and interviews.
So since we had plenty of quantitative data collected from last semester, we decided to collect more qualitative data through more surveys. And we also went to various study spaces on campus individually to observe how students interacted with their study environments. And after immersing ourselves more, we brought together the data collected from both semesters. And based on our analysis of the data, we came to three key insights. One was that the vibe or the general atmosphere of the environment really affects productivity. So taking things into account like noise levels and kind of the lighting and things like that. The second insight we had was that the allocation of resources such as outlets and boards were definitely lacking. And the third was that students choose study spaces based on the limited information that they have. So based on these three insights, it kind of confirmed that redesigning a specific study space like the SSB won't solve all of these issues.
And now we're introduced to Dave. Dave is a student here at UT who loves to grind it out by himself, but when it comes to tests, but likes to work with others when it comes to team and group projects. Overall, Dave chooses his spaces based on what's he doing and where he's studying at. However, Dave has a lot of needs and frustrations as well. His needs includes the space that he's actually working at, his desk, as well as outlets to charge his computer and phone. He also has a lot of frustrations when it comes to the noise in study space environments, as well as the lack of space due to overcrowdedness in study spaces such as the PCL. To initially fix these frustrations, Dave would go to the UT Library's website in order to search what study spaces are out there and what they provide. However, Dave was frustrated as he slowly realized that this website did not meet a lot of the needs that he required, such as outlets and space in those study areas, as well as a lot of the information was lacking and was infrequently updated.
So based on Dave, how can we create a better study environment? How can we find the best study space for Dave? How can we help meet all the needs of Dave in a study space? how can we make it easy for Dave to find the right place to study, and how can we decrease Dave's frustrations when it comes to searching for a study space. So take all these needs together and we get how can we accommodate to the various needs of the study space user.
So we started off with a mass ideation session. You can see on the left here, where we came up with our most ambitious to practical ideas all on one board. And from there, we focused on narrowing down the scope. In part 2, we began to categorize those ideas by using stickers to determine which were practical, interesting, and innovative. We also figured out which of these ideas had similarities and kind of grouped them together by whether they were a guide, a shared social code, a redesign of the space, or resources. We also took into account whether these ideas related to students' awareness of the study space or more with the resources within the actual study space. And our key takeaway from this ideation was that a lot of the ideas were some form of a guide as indicated by the blue notes, as well as resources, which are in the pink. So this key takeaway during our ideation led to our prototype. For students like Dave, whose needs differ and who chooses study spaces based on what they're doing, our team decided to improve their awareness of various study spaces and the resources offered at each on-campus. Using Figma, we prototyped a website database with UT campus study spaces, organized and prioritized by students' needs, which we determined by the survey data we conducted earlier in the semester and the last. These user needs include what you're doing, whether you're doing a quiet individual studying or collaborative group work, accessible outlets, food nearby, proximity, and resources. With our website, Dave can find the right place to study at that meets all of his needs. So this is the homepage, and Dave will have 2 choices: find your study space or suggest one. So a new visitor like Dave will likely press find yours, which will take him to study spaces that are categorized by common user needs we identified earlier in our research. These include study spaces based on what you're doing, outlets, food nearby, closest to you, resources, and study spaces recommended by other students. So let's take a look at study spaces based on what you're doing. Dave needs to find a study space for his group project, so he'll click on collaborative spaces and take a look at options such as the PCL and the Fine Arts Library. Like that, other categories address particular student needs and also take note on others such as outlets that apply to them as well. One category includes an interactive map of campus that will take your current location into account. Now, Dave also takes a look at study spaces recommended by other students, such as the Welch Hall Courtyard and the Tower Space. He can also suggest his own study space through a form located on the home page.
So in addition to students like Dave, we conducted 10 user tests. So we got a lot of great feedback from those tests. For example, a lot of students stated that they go to spaces that may not seem the traditional study space, which is why at the end of the prototype, we added a section for spaces recommended by students. You could also suggest that space. And another student had stated that when it comes to a space, they have various needs. So they might go to a space for both outlets and collaboration. So for example, to address that, under the PCL, we had put an also good for section. This is something that's for every single section. So PCL might be sectioned, might be under the collaborative section, but it might say it's also good for the PCL 5th floor is also good for food from vending machines and maybe standing outlets. So with all that, we brought it together and we reworked our prototype based on those takeaways from those user tests.
Going forward, we plan to have a team that focuses more on implementation. This might include talking to key stakeholders or doing more technical and physical work. As you can see on the side of the PowerPoint slide, this will include testing, planning, proving, and sustaining. However, we are aware of the non-linearity of the design thinking process, and we might have to go back to ideating and building to move further through our progress. Our hope is for our website to be implemented by UT as we have created it in the spirit of the UT, in spirit of UT. Another option might be to create this website on our own, implementing it by ourselves, and thinking of ways to consistently update this.
So our team also reached out to key stakeholders for some more insight and input on our prototype. Some key stakeholders we identified were Doug Gerard, who's the Associate VP for Student Affairs, who we contacted earlier, and Lorraine Harricombe, who's the Director for the UT Libraries. After emailing Lorraine, we were redirected to Chris Carter, who is the Director of Organizational Effectiveness for the UT Libraries, and actually spoke with the Study Spaces team last semester. So we've set up a meeting with Chris for some time next week, and we're hoping to discuss our findings and some steps that we can take towards implementation.
Yeah. So going forward, again, we'd like to discuss our prototype and also discuss the steps we can take in implementing our prototype, and at the same time, maybe ask some questions on why the current UT Libraries website isn't as updated. So that's definitely somewhere we'd like to go going in the future. Are there any questions? Here, I'll stop sharing.
I have a question that might be kind of a big fundamental question. Does the University of Texas see part of its mission as needing to provide study space? Or does the UT Libraries communicate itself as a place for study spaces?
Right. So the reason we're reaching out to UT Libraries is because the original website that we had shown is run by UT Libraries. And those are questions like the ones you just asked are all questions we'd like to ask to Chris Carter. We definitely tried to hold stakeholder meetings beforehand, but because of what was going on at this moment, it was definitely difficult to set up those meetings. But again, the hope is that UT Libraries would carry it out because they do have a website. Again, we have a question on why exactly these may not be updated. And again, we'd like to see if, study space is a priority for UT.
Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I do think that would help clarify this a little bit. I think don't get me wrong. I mean, like, I'm not saying one way or the other. I don't really have an opinion, but it is one of those things where I remember a version of this last semester was very much about sort of like finding the best places to study on campus, which feels very different than what you're proposing right now, which is like the University of Texas establishing and providing a variety of study spaces on campus for student, which means that I think what might be maybe my sort of like, I wish that there was more clarity around what is a good study space. You sort of referenced that like there is variety of study spaces, people desire a variety of study spaces. You sort of referenced some things like outlets and food and location, but I would love much more clarity and specificity around like what's really needed. Because if the expectation is that the university and or the libraries, which are part of the university, but like if they're providing this and or defining it across campus, then you as the designer actually have an incredible opportunity to give the principles and like what is it? It's like it needs natural light, it needs adaptable furniture, it needs outlets, it needs accessibility, like does it need to be hot or cold? Does it need to be a certain color? Does it need to hold a certain volume of people? Like, what is it? So I'd love, as your team who have done so much now, 2 rounds of research, like I'd love to know some more details about it. Instead of just that it should exist or it should have a website, like what is it?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, that's true. And that's why we, again, tried categorizing like the needs. We had an idea of like initially having a hierarchy of needs, like which ones are more important over the other, but the data showed like there isn't one need dominating over another. So which is why we had categorized things based off of like what we had identified as like the most common needs. And I think last semester, where we had left off was, again, we were trying to redesign a study space. Like, we were trying to redesign the SSB, and we didn't necessarily think that, like, again, like, I think something I've learned from 101 and 301, like, sometimes the best design could be the least design, right? And like redesigning entire space is a lot of work, and that may not address the issues at hand, which is why we went through that research and made sure like we weren't jumping the gun there. But yeah, no, I agree that it's definitely interesting to look into like what exactly defines a study space.
I would
Yeah.
add on to that and say like, oh, sorry. Do you want to? Oh, okay. So I guess like something that we found through like our research is that there's no really like one definition of a like good study space, because that really differs based on like who you are and like what your needs are. So that's kind of how we drifted from trying to redesign a space just to accommodate those certain needs to creating like a website database that a user could customize for themselves and the needs that they have in that moment, whether it's like a space they need for like grinding out some studying for their exam tomorrow, or you know, doing some collaborative group work on at PCL on the fifth floor, and just like bringing some more knowledge to those users who may not be aware of like other study spaces on campus besides just like the PCL.
I know Corey wanted to add something also.
Yeah, Ivy basically said what I was going to say. So
Okay.
I had kind of in response to Gray's question of like, did it matter to the university, but also a recommendation to look into the campus master plan stuff. I don't know if it's actually in the master plans themselves that get published, but like I know the committee chair from the 90s, the 80s and 90s, and the entire, like part of the whole reason that they renovated Speedway and put all of these like tables and everything over there was like with the intention of making these like multi-use spaces that could sometimes be for study spaces. They really have a strong dedication to having students on campus with dorms. This is kind of a different focus, but like they want everyone to be on dorms because that's strongly correlated to how well you do in college. And a component of that is that you're studying, it's a more studious environment. And so that they have study spaces just built into every aspect of it. A very, very original plan for campus had like carving out a lot of the older buildings are just good study spots outside because they carve the spaces such that the exterior is a good space to study to. And so you have like Parlin Courtyard and we're like all of the six pack and the lawn where people go and study. So I definitely say it's been a priority. I don't know if it's presently a priority in the master plans, but finding who's in charge of that committee and making them a person to talk to.
What did you mention in the beginning? What committee again?
It's the Campus Master Planning Committee.
Okay, I'll write that down. All right.
Hey guys, it's Doreen. I'm just jumping in for a second. So the libraries is undergoing a massive change, and I think when you talk to Lorraine and Chris, you'll find that they are redesigning library space. If you look at the fifth floor of the Fine Arts Library, that was redesigned 2 years ago with exactly what you're talking about in mind. So there's a lot of study space up there. And it was designed for that at the request of a lot of the fine arts students wanting that. So I don't think there's a holistic plan across the university of what that should look like, but there's definitely an intent to, in general, look at all of the library space and is it being used effectively.
Yeah, that'd definitely be interesting to look into. And again, those are all the questions we definitely have for Chris Carter when we meet up with him in about a week. So yeah, that definitely be interesting. I definitely I was not aware that they were undergoing like a massive, I'd say reconstruction maybe, but I'd be interested to see like what they plan on like reworking. So that's actually really insightful. Are there any more questions?
Feel free to chat them out Oh, sorry, did I interrupt
Oh,
someone?
hi. Hi, my name is T. I'm from DFA Texas State. I think, this is awesome presentations and projects. There's just some questions I have. It's just like, have you done any like research from the user? They say like there's a need for study space on campus. Do they ask for more study space from the student? I think they're just like, and also I think the projects, what you have working on is just so important. I think like space is just one of the fundamental like elements of like to kind of create a sense of belonging community, because the more time you spend on campus, on different location on campus, it's just you feel like connect to belong to the community there. And I think maybe maybe have like the way to help people, like students, explore different location on campus they haven't been to before and study there to see if they can build that relationship with the space and with the people, and maybe meet other people, students from campus that outside the department. I think in terms of like, I agree with like Gray Garmin talked about earlier, like what define a good space for study. And I think it'd be nice to like bring in the co-creation process. It's like, let the student design the space. And I think like I've been to like 2 different campus, and I worked for a library before, and usually different department, they have the budgets to design the space and decide how they want to use the money to design the space, their own space, so there's no master plan. And usually they just like hire like architecture, somebody come in and like, hey, I think the space should look like, instead of like asking the student who uses the space every day, like, hey, what do you think our space should look like? So let the student design that space. It's more like a human center. It's like a co-creation process instead of like, oh, I'm going to design the space for you.
Right.
Yeah,
And I think that's definitely something we went about with the prototype. Was like we definitely wanted to have an ability to like let them customize it. And like you had just said, study spaces are essential to kind of building that campus life. So there again is an option to like explore spaces that students have suggested that you may not have thought of. But I definitely agree that again, like study spaces are a huge part of building that campus, that community. Yeah. Thank you for that.